Never before in human history has the concept of enlightenment been mentioned as much as it is today on social media, forums, spiritual courses, or inspirational videos. Everywhere, people are talking about awakening, raising one's vibration, opening chakras, living with a higher self, or returning to the inner light. Some declare themselves awakened after only a few unusual experiences. Others step forward to teach about the path to enlightenment as if they had already reached the far shore. Communities and live streams are built around the belief that one has broken free from the illusions of the world. Awakening, it seems, has become a cultural, spiritual trend, a place where more and more people want to be recognized as those who have seen the truth, transcended the ego, and merged into the universe. They no longer speak like ordinary people, no longer live like the unawakened. Instead, they wear the cloak of calm, of serenity, sometimes even of mystique. Every gesture, every word, even the look in their eyes, all are expressed as proof of a higher presence, as if they are resting in mindfulness or living beyond the self. We are living in an age where information and experiences are exchanged at incredible speed. But this is also the age where illusion can disguise itself in the robes of knowledge, of spirituality, of awakening, and become the most subtle form of deception. Because when someone has not truly gone beyond the ego, but believes they already have, that very belief becomes the strongest barrier, not only blocking themselves, but also preventing others from touching the truth. And that is why, more than ever, we need to draw a clear line between awakening and enlightenment, not to judge who is right or wrong, but to reflect honestly on our own journey. Are we truly awake, or are we just living inside a new dream? A dream more refined, more pleasant, but still further from the truth? From here arises a phenomenon that we call the awakened person syndrome. This is not a medical condition. It is a very subtle form of distorted perception, where a person believes they have reached a profound state of awakening, when in reality, they have only touched upon a few spiritual or inner experiences. The ego has not disappeared. It has only changed its costume. Now it wears a more elegant robe, abstract, harder to recognize. And in today's world, where teachings about spirituality, meditation, energy, awakening, liberation, and the higher self are widely shared online, people do have easier access to different states of awareness. But with this ease comes a great risk. The ego seizes these ideas, memorizes them, and begins building a new self-image, the image of the awakened one. At first, a person may truly experience a shock of consciousness, a glimpse into the deeper nature of life, a moment beyond the boundaries of reason. But instead of continuing to observe, to let go, to deepen, they rush to a conclusion: I have seen the truth. From there, a new mechanism of mind takes shape, what we might call the spiritual ego. Unlike the ordinary ego, this one does not loudly demand money, success, or power. It only seeks to maintain an image. I am different. I am higher. I am already free. And in that image, they do not realize they have fallen into the deepest trap of all. A trap wrapped in light, surrounded by admiration. No one else needs to deceive them. They have already been deceived by their very own ego in the most convincing way. They are not pretending. They truly feel that they have awakened. But if this feeling is not examined carefully, it becomes the root of a new and subtler ego. And from that root, they begin shaping a lifestyle, a language, gestures, social interactions, all revolving around the role of the awakened person. The sad truth is, society today doesn't warn people about this. It praises them. It celebrates them. It encourages them to dive even deeper into the role. They are invited to speak, called inspirational figures, viewed as symbols of transformation. And little by little, they become prisoners of the very image they have created. They are no longer allowed to feel tired, no longer allowed to be sad, no longer allowed to make mistakes, because any of that would shatter the image of the awakened one. And worse still, this syndrome creates a collective illusion, where entire groups live in the fantasy that they have gone beyond suffering, when in reality, they are only avoiding suffering, hiding it beneath beautiful spiritual concepts. They have not truly transformed within. They have only replaced raw pain with a gentler, more refined mask. But a mask nonetheless. Still a denial of reality. The very essence of this awakened person syndrome lies in the way it prevents people from going further. It makes them stop halfway, believing they have reached the destination, when in fact the true journey has not even begun. It makes them reject advice, dismiss feedback, ignore every sign of incompleteness, because they are too convinced by the false light they think they're standing in. Only when they dare to remove that robe of awakened identity, only when they can admit, "I know nothing, I see nothing, I have let go of nothing," only then can the real journey begin. But to do that, they must be willing to pass through a dark region, a place with no roles, no polished language, no admiring glances, only themselves, face to face with the raw truth of who they are. The subtlety of this state lies in the fact that no one can easily challenge them. Any objection gets dismissed as coming from the ego that has not awakened, or from a limited mind. And so, they create a closed circle, where they are always right, and anyone who hasn't seen is, by definition, wrong, or simply not deep enough. They often speak of letting go, but what they hold on to most tightly is the image of the one who has let go. They lecture about the dissolution of the ego, while their own ego operates powerfully behind the scenes. Not the crude ego of the ordinary world, but a refined one, so subtle that it confidently declares, "I no longer exist." And that very declaration, as pure as it may sound, is already proof that someone is still there, still wanting to have the final word. Those who mistake themselves as enlightened also confuse theoretical knowledge with real realization. They can quote meditation texts, recite Buddhist terms, describe lofty psychological states with astonishing accuracy. But when you observe closely, something feels off, perhaps a trace of awkwardness, or a small lack of honesty in their eyes, their voice, or the way they react when someone disagrees with them. Why is that? Because knowledge can never replace lived experience, and true experience never needs to prove itself. They often appear indifferent to everything, but that indifference does not come from inner strength. It comes from an effort to protect the image. They avoid confronting real emotions, especially those not fit for an enlightened person. Anger, sadness, fear. They no longer allow themselves to be ordinary human beings. Instead, they strain to maintain the appearance of serenity at all times. And that effort creates an inner split. On one side is the idealized self, performing the role. On the other side are the dark, untouched parts of themselves. They also often lose the ability to truly listen to others, not because they intend to interrupt or reject, but because they only listen to confirm their own perception, not to be moved by what is said. In every dialogue, they take the position of guide, helper, path shower. It looks noble. It sounds spiritual. But beneath it lies a hidden hunger, a longing to be recognized. And that is something a truly enlightened person no longer cares about. The final sign, and perhaps the most serious one, is the end of self-doubt. Those who mistake themselves for being enlightened begin to believe there is nothing more to learn, that they have reached the ultimate point, that they now see the essence of all phenomena. They live inside a field of awareness that feels stable, but in truth is frozen, no longer flexible, no longer fluid, no longer capable of dissolving into what is new. And in that state, they do not evolve. They gradually fall into a unique kind of ignorance, an ignorance coated with the polish of false awakening. By contrast, those who have truly seen something, no matter how small, become more humble, more silent, less eager to draw conclusions. They no longer want to assert who they are. They no longer care if others understand them. They know clearly. The deeper the realization, the quieter the heart. The further one goes, the more one dissolves. And if someone is still declaring that they have dissolved, then most likely, they are still very much present, just in a subtler form. On this path, the deeper one travels into spirituality, the easier it becomes to lose direction. Not because of lack of knowledge, but because the ego has grown more sophisticated, harder to recognize. In the material world, the ego reveals itself openly through desire, anger, jealousy, but in the spiritual world, it disguises itself with noble ideas, sacred concepts, and mystical experiences. And this makes spiritual seekers even more prone to getting stuck than ordinary people, because they do not realize they are being guided by an ego wearing the mask of transcendence. The craving for enlightenment, if not seen through, is still just a craving to become special. Many people come to spirituality not because they are tired of the ego, but because they want to upgrade it, to elevate it into a higher form. They don't want to let go of the self. They want the self to become grander, deeper, more mysterious, admired not for wealth, but for awakening. This is a sweet trap. It is not rough like worldly ambition. It is wrapped instead in the language of liberation, of transformation, of service to humanity. And the deeper one practices, the more inner experiences arise. States of stillness, of merging, of connection, even the sense of no self. But without careful observation, people rush to declare, "I have arrived." Yet the truth is, every such experience still lies within the domain of the mind. Anything that can be described, that leaves a trace, that creates the sense "I have seen," is not the ultimate reality. The greatest trap is not ignorance itself, but the illusion of having escaped ignorance. The ordinary person at least knows they don't understand. But the one who thinks they are enlightened stops doubting themselves altogether. They freeze inside a fixed perception, living in an old image they call the light. They keep playing the role of guide, believing the journey is complete. This is not a criticism. It is a painful truth that very few dare to face, because to admit being lost means abandoning a role that has cost so much effort, so much praise, sometimes even an entire career. But unless they can let it go, the spiritual path itself becomes a labyrinth, a maze where one keeps walking, but never finds the exit. Because the traveler has lost the ability to recognize that they are still walking. The most subtle trap is not in the world of illusion, but at the very threshold where one imagines to have gone beyond it. It does not hold you back with chains. It whispers gently, "You have arrived." And if you believe that voice, your journey ends right at the place it truly should begin. Only when you dare to step beyond every definition of who you are. When you no longer try to become anything at all, not even an enlightened person. Only then does the door of truth begin to open. There is no ready-made light waiting behind it. The light reveals itself only when all roles are dropped, all claims abandoned, and only the naked honesty of being remains. There are no titles to be awarded here, only absolute emptiness, a place where every image of oneself has burned to ash. In today's spiritual conversations, two terms are often used as if they were the same: awakening and enlightenment. People speak of them as if both simply mean seeing the truth, but in reality, they are two completely different states, not only in depth, but in their very nature, their process, and their consequences. Without making this distinction, people can easily fall into the illusion that they have arrived, when in truth, they have only stepped through the very first gate. So, what is awakening? Awakening is that sudden moment when you glimpse a truth the mind had never touched before. It may come as a shift in how you see the world, a spiritual shock, a collapse of your old value system. Some awaken after loss. Some awaken in a moment of deep reflection. Some awaken simply through a single phrase, a book, or even a look in someone's eyes that reveals something profoundly new. But here is the important point. Awakening is not the end of ignorance. It is only the recognition that you have been living in ignorance. It's like waking from a dream. Your eyes open, and you see clearly that everything you were chasing was just illusion. But even with your eyes open, you are still lying in bed. You have not yet left the room of the self. You still must rise, walk through deeper, subtler layers of delusion. And that journey, that ongoing process, is the path toward enlightenment. Enlightenment is not a dazzling moment. It is not a glorious experience to be retold. Enlightenment is the disappearance without trace of the one who experiences. There is no longer a self who witnesses, no longer someone to perceive truth, no longer a center clinging to what is called the light. It is absolute absence of separation, of labeling, of the notion of me and the world. Unlike awakening, which can arrive like a sudden breeze, Enlightenment is the fruit of a patient dismantling of the ego, a continuous surrender, a release without conditions. The enlightened one has no need to prove enlightenment. There is no one left to make such a claim. They do not live with a mission, an ideal, or a philosophy. They simply live in perfect unity with reality as it is. Nothing added, nothing taken away. To understand the difference between awakening and enlightenment, we must look not only at surface experiences, but into the very essence of both states. Awakening is the recognition of a new truth, a fresh realization never seen before. It is a shock, a break from the old way of living. Enlightenment is not about recognizing something new. It is the total dissolution of illusion, especially the illusion of self. The enlightened hold no image of themselves, not even the image of being enlightened. In how they occur, awakening can come suddenly, through crisis, through spiritual experiences, or through a striking insight. Enlightenment does not happen like that. It is the fruit of a long process, a steady practice of letting go, deep contemplation, and refinement of awareness, until everything that can be named falls away, including the practitioner themselves. In terms of duration, awakening is usually brief, a flash, and it can fade if not nurtured by continued observation. Enlightenment, by contrast, is stable. It does not waver with circumstances. It is not dependent on emotions or knowledge. From the standpoint of the experiencer, awakening still has a center. There is still a me who sees, who knows, who realizes. But in enlightenment, there is no one left to see. No subject, no object, no inner person encountering an outer world. All boundaries dissolve. Psychologically, after awakening, many feel elated, joyful, eager to share, even to teach. But after enlightenment, there is nothing left to say. No desire to preach. No need for recognition. Silence itself becomes the only language pure enough to remain. And if we look at the role of the ego, awakening is a step forward, but the ego can still return. This time in a subtler form, wearing the robe of awakening, compassion, serenity, enlightenment. In such a space, there is no room left for the ego to exist. The ego is not defeated by logic or by willpower. It simply dissolves completely. For those who are newly awakened, there is a great risk of mistaking the first glimpse for the final arrival. And it is this very mistake that causes many to stop halfway, no longer observing, no longer surrendering. But in enlightenment, there is no one left to be trapped. No more story waiting to be told. The entire structure of I am on the path has collapsed. This distinction is not offered so that anyone may place themselves on a spiritual map, but simply as a mirror. A mirror for those who genuinely want to go deeper, to be honest with themselves, not rushing to cling to special feelings, not mistaking the first lightning flash for the dawn of liberation. And so, awakening is precious, but it should not be idolized. It is like a sudden flash of light in the night, bright enough to reveal where you are, but not enough to illuminate the entire journey. If you cling to that flash, as though it were the sunrise itself, you will never reach the everlasting radiance of truth. By contrast, those who are truly moving toward enlightenment rarely care about the name of it. They are occupied instead with leaving themselves behind, piece by piece. They are not in a rush to speak, not eager to share, because they know every description of truth is already a betrayal of it. And only in that deep silence can the real presence, nameless, formless, untouched, truly reveal itself. To understand the difference between awakening and enlightenment is not to judge who has reached where, but to remind ourselves not to stop when things merely seem right, for true light never dazzles. It is the most silent, the most empty, and the most real. This entire journey you have just listened to is not meant to make you doubt others. It is meant to help you stop believing in the image you carry of yourself, because that image, however subtle, is the final veil between you and reality. If you have awakened, be grateful, but do not cling. If you have not awakened, remain at ease, for truth has never been far from you. If you are walking, walk with empty hands. do not carry any goal, not even enlightenment. And if you stop, then stop completely. Not in search, not in expectation of learning more, just a light, quiet stopping where no one remains. For it may be, in that very pause, what is will reveal itself. No name, no form, no applause echoing anywhere. And in that moment, you will understand why every word written here is only a footprint in the sand. You have not truly listened to a lecture. You have simply passed through a region of emptiness where no one was teaching and no one was listening. We were only the silence between two thoughts. May you awaken in the midst of everyday life and be every day within awakening.